Raquel Welch always used to say she never planned on becoming a legend. She simply wanted to make her mark. Yet from the moment she appeared on that now iconic movie poster, sporting a fur bikini and armed with nothing but a determined gaze, the American film industry decided otherwise. She became Raquel Welch, the sultry starlet braving dinosaurs in 1 million years BC, the glamorous pinup shining from magazine covers, and the target of constant press commentary about her love life. The gap between the real woman and the star persona was something she'd wrestle with for decades, sometimes embracing the image, sometimes pushing it away, but never fully escaping the gravity of that breakout role. She once called that film the silly dinosaur movie, though with a note of fondness, she understood it had made her timeless. Born Jo Raquel Tejada on September 5, 1940 in Chicago, she was the daughter of Armando Carlos Tejada Urquizo, a Bolivian aeronautical engineer who had left La Paz hoping for new horizons, and Josephine Hall, an Illinois native of English extraction. This particular mix of cultures would shape Raquel's sense of self. Growing up, she was equally fascinated by her father's Latin heritage and her mother's more traditional American ways. And she learned early that identity wasn't a simple one-lane track. At the same time, her father wasn't a fan of the modeling world or show business. He wanted something more stable for his children. But from a tender age, Raquel discovered that all eyes tended to gravitate in her direction. Standing in front of a camera felt curiously natural. The Tejada family eventually settled in San Diego, and it was there that Raquel discovered a certain flair for performance. Friends remember her as the girl who commanded attention, even though she wasn't pushy or arrogant. She just had a magnetism you couldn't ignore. By her mid-teens, she was already dabbling in beauty contests, though she didn't broadcast it too loudly since her father disapproved. Still, a quiet, rebellious streak ran through her. She sensed that the sunny world of modeling or Hollywood might be her path, so she kept her dream alive, even if it meant working around her father's rules. At about 15, she met James Welch at school, her first true sweetheart, though neither of them suspected how entwined their futures would be. She'd later remark that part of her teenage fantasy was simply to marry James and have his children. The idea of domestic bliss appealed to a portion of her romantic imagination, so as soon as she turned 19, that dream came true. On May 8, 1959, Jo Raquel Tejada became Raquel Welch for real, taking her new husband's last name. She was still a teenager, wide-eyed about adult life, convinced that it was time to settle down. Soon they had a son, Damon, and a daughter, Tane, 2 children in quick succession. Balancing young motherhood with big ambitions turned out to be more complex than she had ever imagined. James's and Raquel's personalities diverged. While she adored her kids, a voice in the back of her mind kept whispering that she was meant for something bigger than simple domesticity. In the early 1960s, the marriage began unraveling. Raquel was anxious to explore her potential. James didn't share her drive. By 1962, they parted ways. She found herself a single mother, low on funds, but with an unwavering conviction that she had a future in show business. If that meant heading off to Dallas to pick up modeling gigs for Neiman Marcus and waitress at cocktail lounges, so be it. She was determined to keep her children fed and financed, but also to keep her dreams alive. Eventually, she realized that if she was serious about acting, the place to be was Los Angeles. It was a swirling pool of aspiring starlets, slick talent agents, and casting calls that might turn you into the next big thing or leave you struggling for rent. Upon arriving in LA, she crossed paths with Patrick Curtis, a one-time child actor turned agent. He took one look at Raquel and saw potential, star potential, in the classic 1960s sense. She had the face, the figure, the presence. However, he urged her to keep her married name Welch, claiming that Tejada might harm her prospects in a Hollywood that wasn't exactly forward-thinking about diversity. Raquel, uncertain about whether a Spanish-sounding last name would help or hinder her, reluctantly agreed. She recalled that moment as bittersweet. She was proud of her heritage, but she also wanted to succeed. And if Welch was the path of least resistance, she'd take it. By 1964, Raquel landed tiny parts on TV and in low-budget flicks. Her earliest credited roles were hardly glamorous. She popped up in A Swingin' Summer, one of those breezy beach movies that capitalized on America's appetite for bikini-clad teen hijinks. But every set she stepped on, she left an impression, prompting buzz from directors and co-stars. That same year, she became one of the Hollywood Deb Stars, a publicity gimmick used to highlight up-and-coming actresses. Life magazine devoted a bit of coverage to her, labeling her among the most promising new starlets. 20th Century Fox took note, offering her a contract. Reportedly, they tried to rename her Debbie, but she held her ground. She was Raquel Welch, and that was final. Her breakthrough arrived with Fantastic Voyage, 1966. It was a sci-fi concept about a team of scientists and medical personnel shrinking down and venturing inside a human body. Ridiculous premise? Maybe, but audiences loved it. Raquel played a shapely medical assistant, capturing viewers' imaginations. Critics latched onto her looks, praising her otherworldly beauty more than her performance. She smiled through it, excited simply to be recognized as a new face in Hollywood. The label sex symbol was already creeping up around her name, but she sensed that if she excelled in the industry, she could surpass that one-dimensional tag. That same year, she was loaned out to Hammer Films for 1 Million Years BC, shot on the Canary Islands. The plot was minimal. A prehistoric tribe battles dinosaurs, with Raquel's character as a fierce cave woman. Hammer wanted to replicate the success of earlier monster flicks with a twist. This time, place a jaw-droppingly gorgeous heroine in a fur bikini on all the promotional posters. Raquel never guessed the film would become her calling card forever, or that wearing that skimpy bikini in the harsh filming conditions would lead to complications like infection, pneumonia, and misery. But once she appeared on that poster, it was game over. She was the face seen in store windows, bedroom walls, billboards. The world collectively sighed, "Who is that woman?" She was instantly cemented as the decade's hottest new star. Welch or Tejada, it didn't matter. She was Raquel, the it girl. Fame arrived with intensity. Suddenly, magazines were calling her the world's most desirable woman. She was also singled out as the next big sex symbol, in a lineage that extended from Marilyn Monroe, Jane Mansfield, and Brigitte Bardot. But in Raquel's mind, it was complicated. She wasn't ungrateful for the attention, nor was she ashamed of her figure. She was proud to look how she did. But she craved a chance to showcase genuine acting chops. She wasn't content to just lounge in a bikini while prehistoric reptiles lurked nearby. She wanted to stand out as an actress, not merely a pinup. That year, though, the hype was unstoppable, overshadowing everything else. She started taking roles in comedic adventures, often shot in Europe. There was Fathom, 1967, where she portrayed a skydiver roped into an espionage plot. The film flopped and critics were cruel, calling her eye candy, nothing more. She also tried The Biggest Bundle of Them All, 1968, co-starring with Robert Wagner, but it was overshadowed by production drama. Stories circulated about her showing up late, not memorizing lines. Still, she persevered, determined to prove she was more than a pretty face. She next leaped into a Western with big names, Bandolero, 1968. Dean Martin was her love interest, while James Stewart was also on the bill. She recalled feeling overshadowed, but it was still a step up in Hollywood respectability. That same year, she tried Lady in Cement opposite Frank Sinatra. Critics gave it lukewarm reviews, box office receipts were modest, and once again, the press zeroed in on Raquel's looks instead of her comedic timing. The rumor mill spat out rumors of friction on set, though Sinatra never publicly disparaged her. In 1969, she took on 100 Rifles with Jim Brown, an action film set in Mexico. It stirred controversy for an interracial love scene, still a taboo in that era, and a racy bathing scene. Raquel insisted on partial modesty, refusing to go fully nude. The media exploded, calling her too daring or too prudish, depending on which commentator you read. Raquel rarely let it rattle her. She believed in her right to choose how much she'd reveal. Meanwhile, her personal life was becoming newsworthy. Sometime in 1967, she had married her manager, Patrick Curtis. It was partly a business arrangement. He was orchestrating her career, fueling the brand Raquel Welch, and partly a genuine romance. They formed a production company together, hoping to craft roles that would elevate her beyond the sex symbol trap. One result was Hanny Calder, 1971, a Western revenge story about a woman who hunts down the men who attacked her. The film garnered mild box office interest, but overshadowed by bigger Westerns at the time. Years later, Quentin Tarantino cited it as an inspiration for Kill Bill, praising Hanny Calder as a pre-feminist revenge flick starring a woman unafraid to fight back. In that same era, Raquel decided to take a wild risk. Myra Breckinridge, 1970. She was cast as the titular character, a transgender woman in a satirical story about Hollywood's sexual mores. Based on a Gore Vidal novel, the production was chaotic. Mae West was also in the cast, and behind-the-scenes stories say the two starlets clashed. The result was a box office bomb that critics tore apart. Raquel had hoped the role would show off her range. Instead, the film's meltdown overshadowed everything. She discovered that controversial or experimental roles didn't necessarily guarantee critical praise. Myra Breckinridge was a spectacular failure, and the press pinned it all on her. Discouraged, but still ambitious, she forged ahead with comedic hood units like The Last of Sheila, 1973, loaded with star power, James Coburn, Diane Cannon, Richard Benjamin, and others. She found the set environment stressful. Co-stars overshadowed her, and the script gave her limited space to shine. Her personal life was taking hits too. Her marriage with Curtis was disintegrating. The relentless tension of business plus romance made for rocky ground. By the early 1970s, they divorced. Raquel's film opportunities began drying up. Hollywood had a short memory, and many saw her as that Bikini bombshell from the 60s, now on a downward slope. She took a shot at television in the later 70s. She starred in The Legend of Walks Far Woman, a TV movie about a Native American woman's struggles. Critics found the story dull, though they admitted Raquel did a competent job. But it wasn't the big dramatic piece that might have redefined her. Meanwhile, she was dealing with a new wave of trouble, 1982's Cannery Row. Raquel was cast but found the schedule grueling, particularly the early rehearsals, and made it known she wasn't happy. The producers claimed she was being difficult and let her go, hiring Deborah Winger instead. Furious, Raquel sued MGM for wrongful termination. To the shock of many who assumed she'd lose, she actually won over $10 million. This gave her a measure of vindication but did nothing to repair her hard-to-work-with label. By then, she recognized that her star status was no longer guaranteed in film, so she branched into business. She launched lines of beauty products, fitness programs, jewelry, and wigs, marketing them to an audience who still worshipped her iconic image. Despite the negative press, the brand Raquel Welch had significant commercial power. She was also writing a memoir, eventually published as Past Imperfect, bearing some of the behind-the-scenes feuds and personal disappointments she'd kept hidden. She told stories of feuding with directors, her on-set experiences, love affairs. The tabloids splashed sensational headlines. The public devoured every snippet, and some cast her as the woman scorned, while others admired her candor. Relationships kept shifting too. In 1980, she married French producer André Weinfeld. They seemed a glamorous transatlantic couple for nearly a decade, but the union ended in divorce. She jumped at the chance to do Broadway, replacing Lauren Bacall in Woman of the Year, 1981. Critics, expecting to see a pretty face floundering on stage, were pleasantly surprised. Raquel held her own, demonstrating comedic timing and stage presence. For a moment, it looked like she might segue into a legitimate theatrical career. Instead, she took cameo roles on TV comedies like Mork and Mindy, self-parodying her glamorous image. By the time she was approaching 50, she even agreed to a Playboy photo shoot, shocking many who insisted that women her age didn't belong in that magazine. But Raquel was proud of being timeless, refusing to be limited by calendar birthdays. Her father's passing in the mid-1980s brought her some introspection. She recalled how he hadn't been enthusiastic about her modeling path, yet in the end, she'd become an international star. She'd proven she could stand on her own, financially and otherwise. By the late 80s, comedic cameo appearances became her bread and butter. She popped up in music videos, variety shows, talk show interviews, sometimes winking at her own sex symbol branding. In 1990, she married nightclub owner Richard Palmer, tying the knot in 1999 with a big Vegas ceremony. Even that didn't endure. They split by 2003. She joked with reporters that by now she was done with the wedding routine. In 2001, audiences delighted in seeing her cameo in Legally Blonde. She played a woman whose presence exuded effortless glamour, as though poking fun at the fact that Raquel Welch was the template for Hollywood bombshells. She also made appearances on Seinfeld and Sabrina, the Teenage Witch, reinforcing the idea that she was in on the joke. She recognized her place in pop culture and was happy to lampoon it. In 2007, MAC Cosmetics launched a campaign featuring her as its face, describing her as wild, strong, sultry, exotic. Even in her late 60s, she was all of those things. By the 2010s, she was taking fewer gigs, but remained a sought-after public figure. Talk shows invited her to discuss old Hollywood gossip or to reflect on how the industry had changed. She occasionally fielded questions about 1 million years BC, and while she'd sometimes dismiss it as that silly dinosaur movie, she'd add that she was grateful it gave her that big break. She also said it frustrated her that the film overshadowed everything else she'd tried to do. She insisted it was a product of its times with the cheesecake aesthetic front and center, but also believed it paved the way for women to be part of action or adventure stories in mainstream cinema. Approaching her 80s, Raquel still radiated the confidence that had defined her youth. She teased that she was never going to marry again. She'd had enough for a lifetime. Nonetheless, she hinted about occasionally going on dates. She kept her personal life relatively private, savoring time with her adult children, Damon and Tani, both of whom had grown up to witness their mother navigate a roller coaster of fame and scrutiny. Hollywood now revered her as a living icon, inviting her to cameo at film conventions or to appear in documentaries about the 1960s and 1970s star system. She made smaller cameo appearances or voice roles here and there, but it was clear that she was stepping back from day-to-day acting. During interviews, she'd express mild regret she'd never pinned down the sort of role that truly showcased her dramatic potential. She believed typecasting and rapid fame derailed her quest for serious actress credentials. Yet she didn't linger too bitterly on that. She'd pivot to describing how surreal it felt to see her younger self pinned up on 1,000,000 walls worldwide, how that fur bikini image had been reprinted countless times, parodied on comedy shows, referenced in songs, and became a pop culture touchstone. She wasn't sure how to process that a single costume could make someone iconic, but she recognized that it had. For a woman who once saw modeling as just a possibility, it had become a central part of her lasting brand. On February 15th, 2023, the news quietly broke that Raquel Welch had passed away at age 82, reportedly after a brief illness. The Hollywood community mourned, reminiscing about how in the 1960s she literally set screens ablaze with an almost mythical beauty. Friends and colleagues recalled her sense of humor, her willingness to laugh at her own hype, the determined streak that had her championing for more interesting roles, even if she didn't always win them. Publications ran obituaries that underscored her status as a 1960s-70s sex symbol, star of fantasy cinema, and pioneer for women in mainstream action roles. The word trailblazer recurred again and again, referencing how rare it had been to see a woman leading a visually driven adventure film. Those silly dinosaur flicks were rarely anchored by a female star. In the final measure, who was Raquel Welch? She was that timid adolescent from a devout half-Latin household who overcame paternal discouragement to become a top model, only to pivot to Hollywood and skyrocket to global stardom in a dinosaur B-movie. She was comedic enough to cameo as herself in parodies, yet serious enough to fight studios in court for creative respect. She endured heartbreak, divorces, lawsuits, and near financial ruin, but always emerged with another comedic line or cameo. She was unstoppable, comedic, intense, glamorous, a tapestry of contradictions. Younger fans might know her from comedic cameos or brief references in pop culture, older fans from the 1960s pinup phenomena. Yet across generations, she remained Raquel Welch, bold, unbelievably photogenic, forging new definitions of cinematic female power, not to mention comedic cunning in an industry that seldom allowed it. And so we close on the memory of her stepping onto a windy Canary Islands beach, half numb from cold, clad in that fur bikini, forging an iconic moment that would overshadow entire decades. That comedic, silly dinosaur movie changed the industry's approach to female-led fantasies and shaped how mainstream audiences perceive female sex symbols. She recognized its cheesiness but never truly resented it. She used it as a stepping stone, layering comedic roles, dramatic tries, cameo appearances, entrepreneurial ventures, activism, personal crises, and ultimately, a final cameo that testified to her unstoppable star quality. That is the extraordinary story of Raquel Welch, a comedic soul under the surface, a fierce spirit in the face of adversity, and a star whose passing marks the end of one of Hollywood's most dazzling chapters.